Howdy. I'll be speaking on how pollution can both directly and indirectly affect the lives of people in drastically negative ways. It is very important for producers and manufacturers, such as ourselves, to limit the amount of carbon emissions and other types of pollutants that we release into the environment. This pollution can both directly and indirectly affect millions of lives all across the globe in drastically negative ways. It is an issue that must be taken personally by every single member of our society. Whether they work in industry or simply a consumer, they must take this personally and see it as a goal and a mission for humanity to overcome pollution and carbon emission caused by our development. As Mary Robinson said in her speech, why climate change is a threat to human rights, the reality is that this issue is much too important to be left to politicians and to the United Nations. When she said this, it really brought to light within me the truth that the effects of pollution go far beyond just effects on the environment. It's not all just melting polar caps and polar bears and things like that. It affects the everyday lives of human beings in a way that can honestly be considered a violation to their human rights. Mary Robinson gave a very important and a very extremely influential presentation over this issue. Here's some of her background and who exactly Miss Robinson is and why her opinion on these issues matter. All of this information I gathered from the Encyclopedia Britannica's online website and their online article about Mary Robinson. Mary Robinson was the first female president that was ever elected in Ireland. This is huge. She broke the glass ceiling that covered women in politics and really set the standard and pushed the bar for women all across the world. She was born in 1944, and she graduated from Harvard Law and ended up becoming one of the most respected law professors and defender of human rights in courtrooms all across, not just Ireland, not just the UK, but all across Europe and honestly the whole world. She later served in Ireland's parliament for 20 years, from 1969 to 1989, as a member of the Labour Party. She was then able to serve as Ireland's first female president from 1990 until 1997, where she used her influence all across the world as Ireland's head of state to campaign for human rights and to help develop her nation into a world power. After serving as president, she actually resigned before the end of her term to assume a higher position, what she felt was a higher calling. She became the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, which she served in that role from 1997 until 2002, where she continued to her passion of defending human rights everywhere. Some of the accolades she's received throughout her career is the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, as well as the Ambassador of Conscience Award from Amnesty International, which is a organization that fights for human rights all across the globe. Ms. Robinson has received many credentials that lend her a voice in this arena, and she also has a specific target audience in mind when she made this presentation. Ms. Robinson, she gave this speech at the TED Women's Talk Conference in May of 2015, which was in California, and which, as we all know, is a center for many of the world's largest corporations and many of their manufacturing facilities, such as Apple, and many of those in like this Silicon Valley and other things such as that. Ms. Robinson has a history of defending human rights all across the globe, whether as a lawyer, as a head of state, or even as leading one of the UN's commissions on human rights. She's come to recognize, and this is huge, she came to recognize the threat of human-caused climate change as an issue that not only threatens the environment, but threatens human rights all across the world, especially the less fortunate in underdeveloped countries. She gave this speech in an effort to motivate not just the women that were at the conference, but also anyone who saw online the speech as it was stored onto the internet for anyone to see, such as myself. And with this targeted audience in mind, she gave this speech to help move these people to action to help their fellow man. Ms. Robinson's speech honestly helps to change the world. Speech helps to put the threat of climate change into a perspective that is even more expansive than any that I would have ever thought. Up until this point, I honestly felt that climate change was something that just affected animals, and was something that wasn't to be worried about too much in my everyday life. But it makes me realize that humanity all across the globe can suffer from climate change. It causes rising water levels and can cause droughts and floods all across third world countries, which don't nearly put out the same amount of carbon emissions that developed countries do, but seem to be the ones that often suffer the worst consequences of climate change, of human-caused climate change. This speech challenges everyone to change their outlook on climate change from the threat of the environmental impact only to the fact that it's an issue that can drive people from their homes and can cause repercussions that violate their inborn human rights. It also forces people, such as myself, to think and ponder even further about all the vast multitude of ways that climate change can affect people. Whether it's lessened water due to water being contaminated, or even an increase in asthma and allergies, which I suffer from actually, in populations around severely urbanized areas. And the information on asthma and allergies and lessened water I gathered from the National Geographic's online article, 6 Ways Climate Change Can Affect You. And it can even cause people to, and this speech causes people to categorize climate change not only as an environmental issue to be worried about by the EPA, but as a societal and moral issue too. Her ability to bring light to light such a large issue is very important and has an enormous impact. However, it's not the end of the road. Climate change affects so many more people than can be summed up in a simple speech, or an article, or even this presentation. It's more than ice caps, more than polar bears or smog in the sky. It's a human rights issue too. I like the reason that Ms. Robinson once again gave in her speech for entering this battle for battle for human rights. She said, and I quote, "It was because of the impact on people and the impact on their rights to food and safe water, health and education and shelter. That was the reason that she decided to dedicate her time and efforts to this end. And I believe this is a reason that manufacturers, producers, businesses, consumers, and everyone really should dedicate themselves to this issue too." And that concludes my part and presentation over Mary Robinson and her speech about why climate change is a threat to human rights. And now we'll transition into a conclusion that will end the total presentation as a whole from myself and my other colleagues here at our manufacturing plant. Thank you.